Hello, Space Junkies, and welcome to episode 158 of What a Piece of Junk, the Star Wars podcast, here on the Fandom Podcast Network. I am your agreeable host, Scott Baltman, and joining me to discuss episode 5 of Star Wars Skeleton Crew, amongst other things, is my original Wookiee co-pilot, our very own Gooey Chewy, Mr. Dave Filclone, the man of 1,000 nicknames, Nathan Miracle. Nathan, what's up?
Hey, I am doing great. This is our last show of this year because, well, we're right at the end of the year. It is December 29th as we record.
That's right. And so this will be our final show of 2024, which for the podcast is actually the 5th year in which we have recorded, because Derek and I began the show late in 2019. A lot of people think of WAPOJ as a project that started because of the pandemic, and that is not true. We actually began recording this show and talking about Star Wars before, 6 years, that's the word.
Yeah, inclusive there, right? 19 and that's 24 right. Count.
That is true. So, but yeah, we started this before
I am the math budget on this podcast.
You are the math expert. That's right, our accountant. So you would have tax collector and possibly accountant or information broker as bold terms on your Star Wars customizable card game card, which will become relevant later in this episode of the podcast. Because
indeed it will.
Huge news for those of you who still play that game off and on, or all the time, unlike us. But before we get into that, let's talk a little bit about cool Star Wars stuff we got for Christmas, because this is also our post-Christmas episode. Nathan, did you get anything cool for Christmas that's Star Wars related, or anything else cool for Christmas for that matter?
I did get a cool Star Wars related thing, but I'm going to reveal that a little bit later in the show when we do Derek's favorite part of the show, even though he is not here with us today. He couldn't make it because of, Christmas festivities. But I did get a t-shirt that you can see part of and you'll see more of later. I also got a set of Vallejo paints, which will mostly be going on Marvel characters, but I'll probably get the occasional Star Wars character to paint too, because honestly, I play Marvel Crisis Protocol mostly so I can paint a bunch of Marvel characters. And the only reason I don't do that with Star Wars is because I have a limited budget.
Yes, and we don't have as many Star Wars miniatures that games happening as we do Marvel Crisis Protocol. In fact, we're going to play Crisis Protocol here at the Domicile later this very week. So that's pretty cool.
Yes, be prepared for Dracula to show up.
The serial killers. Wait, no, that's Count Chocula. My bad. I also got a cool Star Wars related present. I got a vinyl. It's almost like a vinyl pop of Chewbacca himself to put on my desk at work from Madison Roberts, whom you all met last episode in A Taste of Your Own Medicine, and the rest of her family as well, because they know I'm a huge Star Wars geek. So they wanted to give me something cool Star Wars-y. And in the non-Star Wars present category, I got really awesome a Tesla charging adapter for my non-Tesla EV. So Nathan and I both drive the Chevy Bolt. His is the EUV, so slightly larger than my Bolt EV. And now, he actually beat me to the punch on this, so good job.
Yes, I did.
Now we each have an adapter to connect it's officially called the NACS plug, North American Charging Standard, but we all call it a Tesla plug because Elon and friends invented it. Connect that to the CCS plug that actually works in our cars. And so it's like 15,000 more places that I can charge up the Stormtrooper nowadays with my EV journeys, which is just awesome. And I tested it this past Friday in Spartanburg, South Carolina, behind the Burger King by the soon-to-be-closed Barnes & Noble. Anyway, it worked great. The Tesla app was super smooth. It took 2 minutes for the computer to talk to my phone, and then my phone to talk to Tesla's station, and then boom, we were off to the races. 44 cents per kilowatt hour. So anybody listening to this show in California is seething at the mouth about how cheap that is.
I'm sure. East Coast. So I did get one more thing I have to bring up because I guarantee you can't match this in terms of coolness. I got my very own comic book. That's right. Whoa. Mr. Miracle himself.
Yes.
Written by Tom King and illustrated by Mitch Gerard. Of course, Mr. Miracle is a not as famous DC superhero, but my favorite because of his name, if nothing else. But I also think he's a cool character, and I
Yeah.
did get a uh, collection of not individual comics, but one book of the Tom King series of Mister Miracle.
So we used to call those a trade paperback of all those volumes, of all those
Yes,
issues collected in one volume.
I
I
was
think they
searching
actually
for the
call
name. Yeah,
every one of them now is called a graphic novel, even though that used to be slightly different than a trade paperback. But I think now it's just all lumped into one category.
yeah, but
So
very cool. Um, kind of surprised the person who got it for me because it was on my list and they ordered it and they opened it up and it's not a kid's book. Um,
no.
yeah. So Tom King does
Mr.
not.
Miracle hangs out on Apocalypse and so on and so forth.
Yeah, they happen to open it up to slight spoilers here for a not exactly new comic. They
I was
happen
going
to
to say, you
open.
don't have to worry about a spoiler ban on Mr. Miracle from Tom King. What is this,
Uh,
2000? Maybe 2005? Maybe just 20th century. I don't even know.
I'd have to double check, but they open it up to Big Barda in labor. So
Yeah.
yeah, like yeah, no, nope, nope. You don't need to expound on that. Nope, she's yeah.
Oh, I figured you were going to say something about opening it up to a page where Mr. Miracle is bound, but then, buy Big
Nope,
Barda for purposes.
nope, nope.
Anyways.
Fortunately, no, nothing to that. But
Yeah.
yeah, it was interesting trying to explain. No, no, no. You don't need to look any further into that. Thank you for the book.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Well, we're not here to talk about DC Comics. That's a whole different podcast here on the
It is.
FPN. We're here to talk about Star Wars, and specifically in this segment of the podcast, we're going to talk about Star Wars Skeleton Crew Episode 5. You have a lot to learn about pirates. And boy, did the kids have a lot to learn about pirates in this week's episode. Nathan, overall thoughts about this episode? We find out that SM-33's former captain had a base at Skull Rock, and then we find out that Skull Rock ain't what it used to be. What did you
No.
think when we got to the pleasure planet that doesn't allow kids? Speaking of, this book is not for kids. You see
That's
how I'm
right.
tying it all together here? Anyway, but yeah, what did you think?
Oh, I loved this episode. I thought it was great. There were lots of great individual moments that I'll get into when we talk about what we like best about this episode. But I liked the overall plot of the episode. Of Smee SM-33 is trying to take them to this Pirates Cove, and he's talking about how deadly it is and how the mud covers the bones of the pirate captain's enemies. And you get there, and it's not that at all. To the point where the
Nope.
kids even think, "You brought us to the wrong planet again."
Yeah, you crazy old malfunctioning droid. You don't know anything.
Yeah, but no, he didn't take them to the wrong planet. That planet has just changed a lot. And of
Yeah.
course, the kids get into a misadventure, and we continue the Treasure Island parallels
Mm-hmm.
where Captain Silvo isn't necessarily as good as he seemed to be. We've been getting plenty of warnings. So we find out here that he might be just as treacherous as we've been warned.
Yeah, yet another person warns the kids about don't trust this guy. And of course, they continue to trust him. And we'll see in this episode, it finally catches up with them as they trust him at their peril. I really enjoyed the overall tone of the episode. I loved that the future is nice to a former pirate base. I'll talk a little bit more about that when we get to the what connections did you draw question for the rest of the Star Wars galaxy. And I enjoyed the overall Goonies vibe once we finally did get
Yes.
down into the tunnels and whatnot. Even the vat of acid trap. That was so cool. And I love that they wisely used SM-33 as a way to test the acid. So that was pretty cool. Lots of nice little details in this episode. All right, well, let's go ahead and jump into the questions. Nathan, I'll let you go first. What did you like best about this episode?
Well, it was really hard to pick one thing. So I'm going to talk about a few different things that on their own weren't necessarily the most spectacular things, but were really neat and caused me to laugh out loud, so to speak, and quite literally at times. I loved seeing a hut, and that
Yeah.
hut eating somebody.
And the guy said, "No, no, not
Oh
again."
no, not again.
Gross.
So how did that happen before? Did he like
Yeah,
crawl
how
back
is he
out
not
the
dead?
mouth? I,
Um,
I hope he came out the front end.
I don't think so. It looks
Yeah,
like the place where he's coming out the back end okay because somehow his species has evolved to not be digestible by huts.
or he just knows. Okay, once I get in there, run, go
Yeah.
as fast as you can. Yeah, I don't know. That was really cool. I loved the big guy who we all thought, oh no, he's gonna kill the kids and they're in trouble. And Smee shows up going, the captain needs your help. And then we get back down there and he's just like, I really loved your story.
Yeah, he's
please,
like the coolest. He's so
please.
chill. He's
Yeah.
just a chill guy. He's the coolest dude. And did you? I don't know if you watched it with closed captioning on, but his name is an in joke because he looks like
Yeah,
Cthulhu, and
Cthulhu,
his name
yeah.
was like Kakul or Cthulhu or something like that.
Yeah, he's a Cthulhu-esque character,
Hmm.
but then when you get back down there, he looks like a grandpa. The way that they've done his face, he just looks like he's got a mustache, and he's just
Yeah,
like, "Oh, I'd love to hear more of your stories."
it's kind of like
It was great.
Scheherazade. He was gonna kill him, but he can't because he has to know how the story turns out.
Yeah. And I loved seeing some of the traps. We talked a little bit about the acid, but it was really neat to see the trap where they have the anti-gravity field. And
Yeah,
if you step into it, you go up into the spikes. It's like a spike trap, except
in
reversed,
reverse.
which was
Yeah,
neat to see a Star Wars spin on that.
my dungeon master brain was all ooh ooh ooh, anti gravity spell and spikes. You'll never see
Uh,
it coming because you
well,
just make the difficulty.
I will because
Well,
I
sure,
have
but
seen the
your
episode.
character, see, character knowledge and player knowledge. Oh, sorry, wrong podcast, wrong
That's
podcast.
true. Yes, wrong podcast. All right. Now, if I keep going, I could basically just recite the entire episode. So, Scott, tell me some of your favorite things from this episode.
Well, of course, I loved all the booby traps. Very Goonies feel of One Eyed Willie's cave. This whole place felt like One Eyed Willie's cave. If I remember correctly, One Eyed Willie's cave was under Skull Rock even in that movie at one point. Of course, they didn't call it Skull Rock in the 1980s, but it used to have that nickname. So probably not a coincidence here, but a joke by the writers in Skeleton Crew. I also really liked that we saw the kids use their knowledge of stuff, and specifically KB, use her knowledge of logistics and engineering to set off the valve of mud to help them escape from the guards during the chase scene. She grabbed the little wrench and like hit the thing so they could, the pipe would explode and they'd have enough of a distraction to run away. Great stuff seeing kids out with the guards. Um, I liked the entirety of the feeling of the Pleasure Planet Resort area. Lunespa. Hang on, I'll get it in a second. Lanupa. Lanupa's
Yes.
hotel. It very much felt like Canto Bight, right down to the idea that all these people are here in their finery and they're beautiful, but they're deadly and pretty much evil, right? So it's in keeping with an overall Star Wars lesson about do not judge a book by its cover. In this case, just because she's beautiful and rich doesn't mean she isn't also totally evil and her soul is black as midnight. And also, it was about greed. Once again, a lesson about people willing to sell out their particular morals or personality in exchange for some cold, hard credits. So we definitely get that vibe from Jod almost every time. But this episode, we saw the same was true with all the beautiful people at the resort. So I liked that they kept with those long term traditional Star Wars themes about don't judge a book by its cover, and people are motivated by greed way too often, even in a galaxy far, far away. Um,
You might say, especially in a galaxy far, far away,
Perhaps,
because
yeah, that's
there's
right.
a lot of people motivated by greed there.
I mean, we got this lesson in the very first Star Wars film when Han Solo is all about, I ain't in it for the revolution, sweetheart. I expect to be well paid, right?
It's true.
And he then goes, I'm just here for the money. And then in Empire Strikes Back, Lando Calrissian is the quintessential "I'll sell you out" and double cross people. But happily, he triple crosses, I suppose, when he turns on the Empire as well. So he's the scoundrel with a heart of gold, just like Han. But Lanupa is a much more traditional type of scoundrel without the heart of gold, a heart that is set on getting more gold. And so that was cool to see. All right, what did you like least about this episode?
That's a much harder thing because there was a lot to like in this episode. So I'm going to have a toss up between two things. One is we didn't see what happened to the pirates outside that got covered in the acid. I'm not 100% sure if they're dead. Not quite sure how they could be alive. But then again, I wasn't sure how Maul could be alive after he got cut in half and fell down a
Yeah,
reactor
right.
shaft. So I'm not counting them out until we have confirmation. And since we didn't get it, I can't count them out, but I suspect we're not going to get it because I think we're supposed to just assume that they're dead, which is a very, not quite sure the right term here. Scott, you're a writer. Maybe you can help me with this. Ignominious, is that the right term?
It's an ignominious fate for a character played by no less than Jaleel White. And
Yes.
if they are all dead and Jaleel White's parrot character got killed off screen, well, what a waste. Almost as
Yeah.
big of a waste as the late great Max von Sydow, as Lor Santeca being killed almost off screen in The Force Awakens, but definitely within like the first 5 to 10 minutes.
Yeah.
I
Like
was
the
quite upset
introduction.
about that.
Well,
Yeah.
and we were all convinced before that movie came out that Max von Sydow was going to be a major
Mm-hmm.
character. Like the whole plot would revolve around him, and
He'd
we
be like
were
the new
just wrong.
Obi-Wan, and he'd
Yeah,
inspire somebody with a noble sacrifice. But they inverted it because that was kind of what the whole sequel trilogy wanted to do, was invert our tropes.
yeah,
Not only did he die early and ignominiously, he died hoping to inspire Ben Solo to come back to the light, but didn't.
yeah. So the other thing that was kind of a letdown for me, simply because I saw it coming from a million miles away, when Wim ignited the lightsaber, and of course he's holding it upside down.
Yeah,
It
yeah.
was really obvious what was going to
Some of us,
happen there.
to some of us, it was obvious he had it upside down. Not everyone watching the show would have noticed that immediately, but yes, I
I
knew
didn't
it was
even
going to
have
happen.
to notice that the lightsaber was the wrong way around. Just watching him, like, oh, there's only one way that this is going to go. There's no way that he's going to like successfully fight off Jod with this lightsaber. No, he's going to do what I and all of my friends in middle school joked about. He's going to have the lightsaber the wrong way around and almost stab himself. Of course, when we joked in middle school, it was always, they actually stabbed themselves. It's like a
Yeah.
Jawa turns on the light, looks at the lightsaber, um, or Luke in A New Hope actually,
Yeah.
looks down the barrel of the lightsaber. If he had turned it on at that point in time, whole different trilogy. Uh, yeah, it was a funny moment, so I get why it's there, and I'll enjoy it for what it is. But it was also really obvious what was going to happen. But that lightsaber's still in play because Jod has it, so we'll see how
Yeah,
that works
totally.
out.
Yeah, Mita was asking me about the nature of that lightsaber hilt because it's very ornate, right?
It
Silver
is.
and gold, and hope probably dunium and so on and so forth. But I'll talk about that in a couple of seconds. The thing that I liked least about this episode was the brief introduction of what I hope turns out to be a much cooler character than Aura Singh, but a very Aura Singh esque character, and that is bounty hunter Pocket, Pokkit, played by Kelly MacDonald, who actually has a bit of a Disney pedigree. Kelly MacDonald, who plays Pocket for just a few minutes here in episode 5 of Skeleton Crew, and is an ex-girlfriend, old flame of Jod, and knows him as Dash Zinton. So we continue our
Not
tradition.
quite Dash Rendar.
Not quite Dash Rendar, but we continue our tradition of Jod gets a new alias every episode. So that's pretty cool.
He gets two of them here.
That's true. He doubles up. So this may be
Sort of.
covering for part 6. Anyway, but she is also a Scottish actress that does the voice of Merida in Brave, the animated Disney tale of a fiery redhead Scottish princess. So we have our first Disney Princess Bounty Hunter crossover. Unless you want to say the first one of those was Leia as Bouche the Bounty Hunter, and obviously a Disney princess, but I'm not going to count that because when those two characters came out in the 1980s, Lucasfilm still owned all of Star Wars, and Lucasfilm was an independent company and not owned by Disney. I'm going to say that Pocket is our first Disney Princess Bounty Hunter, and I'm happy because she's a redhead Scottish Disney Princess Bounty Hunter. Anyway, so yeah, that was pretty good stuff. So the reason that I dislike it is because she was only in the thing for like 2 scenes. I wanted more of her.
Yeah. I will grant you that. I want more Pocket.
Yeah. So it'll be cool to see how her history with Dash Zinton or Jod might come into play in later episodes, but we might not see her again. But she exists now, so A, we could get tie-in ancillary merchandise, or B, she could show up as a character in a comic book for Marvel Star Wars or something like that. And so it's pretty cool that she exists, but I disliked that part of the episode where they only used her for like a minute and a half or 2 minutes or whatever it was. All right, so speaking of Star Wars comics and whatnot, question 3, what connections did you see to the rest of the Star Wars galaxy, Nathan?
Well, several. You stole one of them, although this isn't technically a connection to the Star Wars galaxy. I was also going to mention that Kelly MacDonald was in Brave. I did get another Disney connection in when Jod gave his fake name. He almost said, "Yes, I am Professor Gallywickets." Which would be, you mean Galakowitz? Yes, I do. Which would be a parallel to, of course, Phineas and Ferb with Dr. Doofenshmirtz trying to bluff his way into a meeting. Wasn't quite the same name, but it was close enough that I pointed at the screen and went, they did the thing. For a few actual Star Wars related things, we have the alien that the Hutt ate is the same species as one that we saw in The Last Jedi on Canto Bight. If I'm not mistaken, it was one that was voiced by Mark Hamill himself.
Oh, no, I don't think that's the same species as that guy. That guy had the monocle and whatnot. The little Major Domo thing that was feeding the Hutt in this episode was a different alien on Canto Bight, I think.
Okay, there were a bunch of them, so I could easily be getting them confused. But perhaps a more important parallel or connection is the banking clan, which we haven't seen since the fall of the Empire. In fact, it seemed like they had been wiped out with the Empire. So they've either made a return or they've been kind of underground this whole time. But we got a reference to Scipio as well. We figured out that Jod is not Professor Gallywickets because Professor Gallywickets is from Scipio. Yep. And the people
he wouldn't look like that.
Don't look like humans. Not at all. They're much taller and thinner than Muon. That's why Jod runs when the guard says from Scipio, because anyone who knows what the people of Scipio look like, it's very obvious. This is not you.
Right.
All right. So what other connections did you see?
A very obvious one, but still, I think, important for a new generation of Star Wars fans, a restraining bolt. Yes. Now, you and I know what a restraining bolt does, like the back of our hand. What the heck is that? Anyway, but younger fans might not be familiar with restraining bolts because it's a big deal for R2-D2 and C-3PO in A New Hope, but a lot of younger fans haven't watched A New Hope as often as we have, and so they don't understand that that's the purpose of a restraining bolt, was to control a droid. But also, in this episode of Skeleton Crew, when they put the restraining bolt on SM-33, Smee is not just, under the control of somebody with a remote, like a collar, like a Jawa uses in Episode 4, A New Hope, but it also restrains him from his violent tendencies, because Smee very much likes to attack first and, deal with questions later. Never. And so we see an active restraint with the restraining bolt, which we hardly ever see in Star Wars anyway. Most of the time when a droid, even in animation, when a droid gets a restraining bolt put on them, they're just like, oh, well, I know what this is going to do. I don't want to mess with it. I'm going to behave. Smee does not believe in that kind of thing, or he's too old and cranky to remember what that does, or he's never had one before. That's also possible with a pirate droid. And so he's just all like, I'm going to strangle you. And, now he's dealing with the restraining bolt. So that's, of course, a big time Star Wars connection. And it helps teach a new generation of young fans what a restraining bolt is and what it does. And if you think about kids watching Skeleton Crew who are the age or close to the age of our protagonist kids, they now know what a restraining bolt does, like a shock collar. So this makes more sense to them, and it will open up other Star Wars stories to them. And of course, we had the moment where after Jod betrays the kids, he pops the restraining bolt off of Smee so that Smee can go back to his usual malicious and psychopathic droid ways. Psychopathic droids also to be seen later in this episode of the podcast. It's all coming together. And so that was a cool connection. This is a bit of a stretch, but I'm going to do it anyway because I want to talk about Pocket again. Pocket is wearing a cool lei with a particular type of bloom that is reminiscent of the blooms on the Pashta planet that our heroes visit in Episode 9, The Rise of Skywalker, when they go to that I think it was every 45-year festival or what have you. So she's there to celebrate, and it looks a lot like 3PO, Poe, Finn, and Rey, and all of them when they have their leis on as part of the celebration, which is pretty cool. And I also enjoyed the connection of, you already mentioned there was a hut there on the Pleasure Planet, yes. So that was neat. And then the sigils.
Okay, yes.
The little sigils of various other Star Wars things are referenced throughout the resort there, and one of them becomes important because it is the marker for the old pirate captain.
Not quite what I thought you were going to say, but
tattoos. But yeah, go ahead.
The hut had a tattoo on its chin, which is the same tattoo but a different color as the huts we saw in the Book of Boba Fett.
I didn't realize it was the same as those huts, but yeah. That's cool.
Yeah. So those the ones in Book of Boba Fett are red, and this one is green. So that doesn't necessarily confirm much since they're different colors, but they could be related.
So Jabba's tattoo, Jabba the Hutt's tattoo, in old EU lore was a Desilik tattoo for his particular crime family, which was the same one as used by the two huts that we see in Book of Boba Fett because they've come to be all, hey, Jabba was our dude, and we've come to take his stuff. So I don't know if this hut would supposedly be the same one. Maybe the color denotes a different family, clan.
If it's part of that clan, it seems to be a different one because this hut is not as big as the ones that we saw in Book of Boba Fett. But it could be part of the same clan. We just don't have enough information to know on that, but it's fun to speculate.
And we got one more tiny Star Wars connection that is a Star Wars streaming connection because it's something that was introduced in The Mandalorian. Pocket mentions checking the pucks to see if there's a current bounty on Silvo or Jod or Dash Zinjar, Crimson Jack. And so she decides not to check the pucks. Nudge, nudge, wink, wink. And then, of course, later we see this perhaps is another Star Wars connection. Curse your sudden but inevitable betrayal as she calls in Brutus and the gang to come after Jod and the kids. So she's well aware that there's a bounty on his head. She used to be his girlfriend. I bet she could assume at any point in time, somebody somewhere has a price on his head because he has betrayed the whole galaxy, basically.
Oh, and I'm pretty sure she has a good idea of who. I think she was telling the truth when she said, I won't check the pucks. She just knows there's no need. Like, I'm sure there's a bounty on your head. I know exactly who to go to. And oh yeah, there is a bounty. Cool. Pay up. Like, did I check the pucks? No need.
Right.
So all right, question. Please say that I did. There's one more that I thought you were going to go with. The lightsaber was very decorative. You mentioned that. It looked to me like it came from the High Republic era.
That's cool. I told Mita that I thought maybe it was a temple guard's lightsaber. because
Could
it made
be.
me think about that. But then when they turned it on, it was
It
blue and
was
not
blue, not
gold.
yellow.
So you're probably right. It may be left over from the High Republic, and that can give us a
Well,
tie-in with that whole novel series.
and it could actually be from the old Republic itself, because
Mm,
if if the treasures from At Atten, if these are
hmm
treasures from At Atten, then it would make sense that this is an old Republic era lightsaber.
And speaking of Star Wars: The Old Republic, if I may make just a tiny segue, now is a great time to go play Star Wars: The Old Republic MMO. If you've ever wanted to, but you've been putting it off because you felt that graphics looked a little dated, you're right, because the game is, gosh, more than 10 years old now. But recently, there was an update by Broadsword Entertainment, the new owners of Star Wars: The Old Republic MMO, to beef up the graphics. So the game is more beautiful than ever, and has a huge graphics overhaul in version 7.4. And so if you wanted to play, you can still play for free. You can play a boatload of content for free without ever having to subscribe or spend money in the cartel market on microtransactions. And you can even do just focus on single player stuff if you don't want to do MMO stuff. So yeah, go check it out. We do still have a What a Piece of Junk guild or fleet over there on Star Wars: The Old Republic, although I haven't played in many months. I've been much more interested in
Yeah,
World of Warcraft and Marvel Rivals, which is pretty fun, but an entirely different genre of game.
I should get back into it too.
Yeah, yeah. I think you would obviously you enjoy that style of game and genre way more than the Rivals genre of first
Right,
person
right.
shoot 'em up team squad stuff. There's no real storyline in Marvel Rivals. Star Wars: The Old Republic MMO is like 95% storyline and 2% PvP or questing or mission logs. Anyways, but let's move on to question number 4 for this episode of Skeleton Crew. And these are the customized questions based on the stuff that happened in this specific episode. So here in episode 5, you've got a lot to learn about pirates. Finally, Captain Silvo shows his true colors and actively attacks one of the children, and then has Smee take the children prisoner for just a couple seconds. Yeah, it shouldn't have been a surprise, but I was still sad to see it happen. I was kind of hoping he would be a scoundrel with a heart of gold, but clearly he is not. He is much more like Long John Silver from his namesake, as it were, in Treasure Island, and so or Treasure Planet, perhaps. Question 4, Nathan, to you: Is Jod going to actually hurt the kids?
No, no, he
Okay,
is
good.
not. I don't believe that he is, and I will give you my very specific reason as to why. When he is holding up the sword or the knife to Fern's neck, it's backwards. The blade is
Well,
not against her neck.
th- that is true, but the sawtooth hack is. I mean, he could still kill her that
He,
way.
he he could, but I feel like if he was actively trying to kill her, he would have had it turned around the other way. I think that is supposed to be a hint to us, the audience, that he is not trying to kill her. And honestly, if he wanted to kill her, he had the chance.
Oh, sure.
He
Yeah.
he could have killed her. He obviously doesn't want to kill her. He wants her to relinquish command.
hmm
I feel like he's got some reason why he feels he needs to be in command. Possibly he needs to not run everything by Fern every time he wants to do a thing. Now that pirates are after them, and there's a more clear and present danger, he needs to
Yeah.
be able to act quicker. So I don't think he's trying to hurt them. I think he just needs to take control of the situation, and he felt like that was the best way to do it. And he's not really good at explaining that to kids.
True. I'm gonna counter you, not just for the sake of discussion, but my question was, is Jod gonna hurt the kids? And I think he already has. I think the betrayal was painful in and of itself. So I'm gonna say yes. He's going to hurt them. He has hurt them already, and he's going to continue hurting them because they wanted him to also be the scoundrel with the heart of gold. Especially
That's true.
Wem wanted him to be a Jedi and do the right thing. Now, because this is a Disney Lucasfilm production, I think we'll actually get a slight inversion of Treasure Island. And at the end, he will end up doing the right thing to help the kids in some way. I don't think he's going to, turn into Han Solo or anything. Although, if you ask Ben Solo, Han never actually turned into a good guy all the way. It's all from a certain point of view.
It's almost
And
like
so I
that's a
think,
recurring theme.
yeah. So I think from a certain point of view, Jod is going to help the kids, but from another point of view, he's already hurt them, and he's going to continue to hurt them for selfish treasure hunting reasons. But to quote Johnny Depp from a whole different Disney franchise, hello, pirate. And so you've got a lot to learn about pirates. It's right there in the title of the episode. Wait, did Dave Filoni work on this? Oh, anyway. All right. So, question 5. What do you got, Nathan?
Well, at the end of this episode, the kids pull a booby trap knowingly, purposefully pull a booby trap and fall down a chute to who knows where. And my first thought was, death can await you at the end of that chute. You may have just killed yourselves. That's going to be very anticlimactic into the series when we get to the next episode and it's just 4 dead kids.
4 dead kids, Jod and Smee.
So the rest of the skeleton crew is just those 2 because everyone else is dead.
No, they're now skeletons.
Oh,
see, it's right there.
That explains so much. Yes. Yeah, so obviously that's not going to happen. We're not going to kill all the child protagonists, even though this was a colossally stupid move on the children's parts. But where are they going to end up?
All right, so my answer is, in a huge homage to The Empire Strikes Back, they slide down the ventilation shaft, and their kids are all hanging onto a, in this case, astrogation vein in some big chamber underneath this treasure room where Smee's old captain used to do all of her navigating and our astrogation. And so they are hanging on to something, and they unwittingly discover the coordinates to At-Aten. Then also unwittingly destroy the whole room as they try to get out of there. As it's collapsing, they make it back to the ship just in time for Jod and Smee to also arrive back at the Onyx Cinder and be all, "You destroyed the astrogation chamber. Now we don't know where to go." And Fern is all like, "I memorized it." Or KB is all, "I memorized it with my photographic memory. So now you have to trust us if you want to get out of here and get to At-Aten." To once again force their cooperation amongst themselves between Captain Jod, or Captain Crimson Jack, and Smee and the kids who now have the coordinates but don't have the ship. Whereas Jod has the ship but no coordinates. Da-da-da-da.
I like this plan. I have a completely different idea here.
Sure, good.
And my idea makes no sense, but I think it might happen anyway. No sense as far as gravity is concerned, because they should be below everything. But I think somehow it's going to drop them out into one of the mud pits, because those mud pits are now used for mud baths that are supposed to be nice and relaxing. But Smee told us that that's where the former pirate captain buried all the bodies. And what more efficient way to bury people is there than have them go directly to the place that you want to bury them?
Yeah. And that would be but you know what it could be? Once again, an homage to Star Wars tradition. They fall into the pit to fight some Rancor. Although it'll be funny if the Rancor has long since died at the bottom of the pirate hideout, because the pirates have all been gone for so long, and the kids fall in there, and there's this massive set of jaws, and they're all, "We're all gonna die!" Yeah! Oh wait, it's already dead.
and if we do that, it could be that the Cthulhu character also has a way down there, just shows up and like, "Oh, hey guys."
His tentacles are just long enough to reach all the way down.
Yeah, it just scoops them up like, "Hey, need a lift? Here you go."
Yeah.
Certainly seems to be a friend. So I wouldn't be surprised if he comes back in a small way in the next episode.
Yeah, he was too cool of a character not to.
Yeah.
All right, well, if any of those endings to the kids falling down the booby trap chute happen on the next episode of Skeleton Crew, you can be sure that we're going to talk about it ad nauseum here on What a Piece of Junk, the next episode. But before we finish this episode of the podcast, we want to talk a little bit about some Star Wars customizable card game cards that have recently been teased by the SWCCG Players Committee. But first, let's take a short break so that Kevin can tell us about the other shows here on the FPN.
Thank you for listening. We hope you're enjoying this podcast. Here are the other great shows on the Fandom Podcast Network. Culture Clash, where we discuss the latest in entertainment and pop culture. Blooded Kings, our show covering the entire Highlander universe. Couch Potato Theater, we celebrate our favorite movies. And Time Warp, our fandom flashback show discussing a year in movies and our favorite retro movie, TV, and pop culture topics. Good Evening, discussing all things Alfred Hitchcock. Hair Metal Podcast, we cover the rock metal music of the 80s and early 90s. Type 40, a Doctor Who podcast, discussing the time-traveling Doctor Who universe. Lethal Mullet, an action film podcast covering the 80s, 90s, and beyond. Also, check out the Lethal Mullet Network for more great podcasts. What a Piece of Junk, our Star Wars podcast. Making Treks, a Star Trek podcast with a deep dive into the final frontier. The Fandom Show, our Fandom Podcast Network live YouTube show discussing the hottest topics in fandom. The True Believers MCU podcast, discussing the Marvel Cinematic and Television Universe. Union Federation, our Star Trek and the Orville Show. And we're proud to welcome the BQN Network to the Fandom Podcast Network. Please visit our friends on the BQN Network, a Star Trek Universe podcast that also includes your favorite topics, movies, history, superheroes, and more. You can find the Fandom Podcast Network on YouTube. The Fandom Podcast Network is also on all major podcast platforms. The Fandom Podcast Network audio master feed is on Podbean at fpnet.podbean.com. You can find the Fandom Podcast Network on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. You can email us at fandompodcastnetwork@gmail.com. Thank you so much for listening, and remember, respect others and enjoy your fandom.
All right, thanks, Kevin. So, Nathan, we've got some spoilers, or teasers, if you will, from set number 24 for the Star Wars Customizable Card Game virtual cards, and huge news about said virtual cards as a type. In the past, in order to play Star Wars CCG, even here in the contemporary era, filled with virtual cards and virtual card slips, unlike our beloved Star Trek CCG, where you can print out any card you want, cut it up, and slide it in front of another card in a card sleeve, you had to have particular Star Wars CCG cards from Decipher from the 20th century laying around the house that you were comfortable enough with cutting up other pieces of paper and sliding them in front of those cards, either just the text box leaving behind the image still from the film or the video game that Decipher had used, or you could sometimes get an entire card and cover a different card with it. This is something to do with the vagaries of licensing between Lucasfilm and the Players Committee that was set up even long before Disney took over Lucasfilm. I won't get into all of the legal mumbo-jumbo, but they have recently made a decision over at the Players Committee for Star Wars CCG for any full-sized virtual cards, so not virtual slips, but the full-size virtual cards. You can slide them in front of any existing Star Wars CCG card of the appropriate side of the Force. So in the card game, you have two decks, a light side deck and a dark side deck. So you could put light side cards that are virtual and full-sized in front of any other light side card. And same thing for dark side virtual full cards. This is huge and makes life so much simpler for those of us who want to play the game, but don't necessarily have enough copies of Luke Skywalker Jedi Knight, even if we want to use the virtual version to cover up Luke Skywalker Jedi Scout, or whatever his title may be. Apologies to my Star Wars CCG fans out there who are now yelling at the podcast that I can't remember my titles. I'm sorry, I'm on the committee for Trek, not Wars, and we did this thing like, I don't know, 10 years ago, right, Nathan? Something like that?
Something like that. Gosh, it may even have been longer ago than that. And of course, with the Star Trek game, you don't even have to sleeve them in front of Star Trek cards, as long as all the backs are the same and you can't tell from the back what card is which. Then that's all legal. But as you mentioned, there's different rules and legal issues with that. So I'm not telling people to do that with this game, especially if you want to play in sanctioned tournaments, but it will be a lot easier to use the full-sized virtual cards now.
Yeah, so I'm looking forward to hopefully our crew, Team 42, that usually plays a lot of Star Trek CCG tournaments when it's not the busy holiday season, that is. Maybe someday soon we'll be able to do a Star Wars CCG tournament of our own, and I'm hoping maybe we can even do like a virtual format where all the decks use full virtual cards and we could just go nuts. It also means that I can take things like the aforementioned virtual Luke Skywalker and slide him in front of, I don't know, a light side Jawa, of whom I have like 1,000 copies that are just sitting in the closet doing nothing. So that'll be fun. But we're going to take a detour way deep into the geekdom of Star Wars and card games and talk about 6 new spoiler teaser images from set 24, including one of my favorite expanded universe characters that I am so happy to see has returned to canon thanks to the new EU from Disney, Lucasfilm, and also now is finally in the Star Wars card game from Decipher. Nathan, if you want to hit the thing to share, or should I share my screen?
I can. Well, if you have the individual images, that might be easier. If not, I can share my my screen.
I've got the post on the forums.
Okay.
So let's just do it like that. Although this is not actually going to fit in the entire.
Yeah, if you can zoom out just a little. There you go. Yep. Now we can see it just fine.
All right, so first up, we have a light side character that would go in front of the old light side card, Order to Engage, but again, now you can put her in front of a light side mining droid if you really want to. It's Jedi Marshal Avar Kriss from the High Republic. This, of course, is a Jedi Master card, so her icon at the top left is a blue lightsaber. Destiny 2, she's got the Episode 1 era property logo up there by her lower box, denoting her as someone from that era, so she works with other cards that key off of that icon. And just a beautiful cosplay picture from Mystic Dragon at 091 on Instagram. So if you guys want to go and give her a follow, or at least a like, I'm sure that she would appreciate that. And the artwork is, of course, not official by Lucasfilm standards, but man, is it great. Good work, Mystic Dragon. Power 5, Ability 7. For those who play this game, you understand that's a pretty potent character. She is immune to attrition less than 5 in her game text. And for those of you who haven't played in the virtual era that might somehow be watching this on YouTube, you'll note that she has the pilot icon and the warrior icon and the set 24 icon. She's deploy 5 and forfeit 7, and we no longer use the language of adds 2 to the power of any starship she pilots. We now just have the pilot icon in her text box with a number 2. And in this case, comma number 3 if she's on a capital starship. So Avar Kriss is better at commanding capital ships than flying a snub fighter, but she can still get the job done in any cockpit. And while piloting a capital starship, that ship is immune to attrition less than 5. So even more utility out of this character. And finally, as if all this wasn't good enough, once per game she may take into hand from reserve deck or retrieve from the lost pile a musician. She is herself a female musician, so she can go into your Figuring Dan and the Modal Nodes deck if you really want to get jizzy with it. So there you go.
Yes.
Nathan, what do you think about this character?
First off, gorgeous looking cosplay. That is incredible. The only cosplay I can pull off is, Dave Filoni, which I don't make a half bad Dave Filoni if I do say so myself. But that looks incredible. I love the fact that she's got immunity to attrition less than 5, because a lot of the Jedi that we saw in Episode 1 didn't have immunity to attrition for balance reasons, and that made sense because if the light side suddenly got a whole bunch of Jedi Masters who are immune to attrition, that would be a balance problem. But it is nice to see a Jedi Master who does have some immunity, even if it's not complete immunity. And I love the fact that she makes capital starships immune to attrition too. One of the problems, if you're trying to build a deck around ships, is even if your characters aboard the ship are immune to attrition, if the ship itself isn't and you lose the ship, everyone aboard goes away as well. So it's nice to apply that immunity to attrition to the ship itself, which also protects anyone who's aboard the ship.
Yep, and I neglected to mention the original concept for this card was by Players Committee, or just players of the game now still, Chris Van Bearden and Chris Menzel. So really good idea there, guys, of how to capture this character. And I want to say she has High Republic in her lore, so I think this is a character from the High Republic books and comics. So I think that's where Avar Kriss comes from as one of the major protagonists in that series.
Yeah, she's not a character that I'm terribly familiar with, but from what I can tell, she does come from the High Republic era. So that episode 1 icon is really anything prior to the original trilogy or the Empire, the Galactic Civil War era.
Yeah. All right, moving on, we've got a dark side spoiler here, not from episode 1, but from the Galactic Civil War era. It is the second sister, a female Inquisitor. She's kind of like a mirror for Avar Kriss. They like to do that in this game to keep things, as Nathan said, balanced between the light side and the dark side. Beautiful cosplay here. I believe this might just be artwork from Louis Petinelli at ArtStation. Oh yeah, ArtStation. So that is artwork, not cosplay. Excellent.
But it's good enough art that we didn't know that just by looking at the card
exactly
immediately. So that's really good.
Now, the second sister is an Imperial, so she's got the Imperial cog as her personnel or card type, character type logo. She does have the dot, just like Avar Kriss, to show that she's unique. There's only one second sister, so you can only have one of her in play at a time. Destiny 2, second sister, good times.
I get it.
Power 4, ability 5, so she's Force sensitive, but not yet a Jedi Knight or Dark Jedi, and that's how Vader likes his Inquisitors to remain. She also has the pilot logo and the warrior logo, but note that she does not add power to any of the starships or vehicles that she pilots. She is also deploy 5 and forfeit 7. She would go over R2-Q2 if you're wanting to be a purist, but again, nowadays, you can put her in front of a dark side Yuzum if you really want to. Power 4, ability 5, Padawans are power -2 here in her text box. Very flavorful for an Inquisitor. Once per game, may place a hatred card here in owner's lost pile to choose. So the hatred cards are cards generated by a particular effect that deals with Inquisitors and Darksiders. So she can get rid of one of them from her location to the owner's lost pile to choose one of these effects. Deploy a lightsaber on second sister from the lost pile, or take any card into hand from your used pile and reshuffle. And unless Vader is here, she is immune to attrition less than 4. So she doesn't work well with Vader, but you want to keep your Inquisitors spread out from Lord Vader because he's having them go out and handle the dirty work, or the light work, if you will, that he isn't going to do himself. So that's an interesting restriction to Second Sister, and I believe a few other Inquisitors in the card game have that, just so you don't start piling up a huge area of dark side powerhouses.
Yeah.
What do you think, Nathan?
She does go in a specific deck type, the hunt down and destroy the Jedi objective, which there is a virtual version of that came out in set 13, specifically works with Inquisitors. So it does a couple of cool things. For example, Inquisitors are Destiny +1. So even though she's printed 2, she would become a 3. And that is also the card that generates the hatred cards that are referenced.
Sorry, yes, objective, not effect. My bad.
Yeah. So she's very clearly meant for a specific deck type, and you'll find that a lot of cards in this game are, but it's a deck type I really enjoy because I get to play Inquisitors, and that's fun even if I'm not winning, which I often don't in this game. So my goal is to have fun.
There are a few games that Nathan has quit, and this was a game where he has actually quit. Most of the time he's all, I don't have to win, I just have to not lose.
Yeah, but in this game I lose. But I keep coming back because it is such a good game overall.
Yeah, it's
I
very
can't
well
stay
designed.
away.
Cool. All right, let's move on to my favorite card in the new set, and possibly one of my favorite cards ever in this game, and that is everyone's favorite giant green rabbit, Jackson T. Topiraki, has made his debut in Star Wars CCG, and I could not be more excited. So, Jackson is a large green rabbit. In fact, he's a Starhopper mercenary. He is a lipai, gambler, smuggler, and thief. All three of those words, gambler, smuggler, and thief, have various uses from other cards in this game, so that's great. He is an alien, so he has the little Jawa eyes as his card type icon. He is Destiny 3, is unique. There's only one Jackson, baby. And this image is courtesy of Tom Rosie on Instagram. So I don't think this is a cosplay. It's just artwork. Or if it is a cosplay, it's an excellent melding of body armor and furry suit. Actually, now that I look at it, I think that's what happened. That's excellent. Anyway, he is Power 3 and Ability 3. You may be sensing a theme here. He's Deploy 3. Hey, look at that. Forfeit 5. He is a pilot, just like the second sister. Jackson does not add anything to the ships that he pilots, but he does pilot a ship, which is important. And he has 2 warrior icons because everybody knows he's got that one gun and then he's got the lucky rabbit's foot, so he's got the other gun. Jackson is famous for dual-wielding pistols, and he can do that in the card game. In fact, his game text says that he deploys -1 to Cloud City, so he's hanging out at the party city because he's a gambler and a smuggler. Any blaster may deploy on Jackson. Han's DL-44, no problem. Cloud City Blaster, you got it. Boba Fett's E-33, I don't know, somehow you stole it? Oh wait, look at this. Any blaster may deploy on Jackson once per game, may deploy a blaster on Jackson from the Lost Pile, or Jackson may steal one from opponent's Lost Pile. While at opponent's battleground, the card Imperial Enforcement is suspended. And perhaps the best part of this card, if you wanted to be a stickler and put him in front of the card he replaces, he goes in front of Hopping Mad. Good work to Angelo Consoli and Chris Menzel, once again, from the Star Wars Players Committee for putting this card in front of Hopping Mad. I can't tell you how happy I'm about Jackson. He turned out great. Now, while he has no immunity to attrition himself, he does get to do that great stuff with double blasters, including stealing them and retrieving them. Could not be more pleased with Jackson as a character. Nathan, what do you think? Oh, we've lost your translation matrix there, Nathan. You got so excited that you muted yourself for your hoops of joy with Jackson T. Toporaki.
I did, which is probably for the best, because I was whooping for joy. But I am glad that you specified everyone's favorite green giant anthropomorphic rabbit, because I do love Usagi Yojimbo, who is, of course, a white giant anthropomorphic rabbit. But I would play this character in a deck revolving around rescuing the princess.
That's a great idea.
Because there are several cards in that deck that care about blasters. You can actually start the game with a card called A Good Blaster at Your Side, which there's actually a combo version of that goes with restricted deployment that allows you to search your deck for blasters. And this guy loves to have blasters. Any blaster can deploy on him, including an uncivilized blaster, which normally can it can be deployed on any warrior, but gets an extra benefit if you shoot with Corran, Kanan, or Obi-Wan. So it's actually a blaster that Obi-Wan wants to use because it's so uncivilized.
Yes,
but very good. You can also give him, as you mentioned, Han's blaster or Luke's blaster. You can even give him a stolen Stormtrooper blaster, which is pretty cool, if I do say so myself. So that's another deck type that I enjoy playing, not because I'm good with it, but because it's fun to run around the Death Star and try to rescue the princess and shoot stormtroopers.
Yeah, excellent. I can't wait to play a deck with Jackson in it, blasting away. That'll be so much fun. And in keeping with our expanded universe theme here, we've also finally got the card game debut of, combo debut of BT1 and 000. They are an assassin and information broker and a droid for the dark side with the C-3PO-I as their card type. Destiny 3, the image is a courtesy of Action Figure Barbecue and A308 Digital. Action Figure Barbecue sounds amazing, and I'm definitely going to be Googling that after this episode of the podcast. Not too bad for droids here. So in this game, droids don't have a connection to the Force, so they have no ability. But the duo here that usually hang out with Dr. Aphra are Power 5, Armor 5, and their defensive stat is an asterisk, which says astromech and protocol droid. Sorry, next to the defensive stat is an asterisk. If with Afra, so there you go, may add 1 destiny to attrition. Battle Destiny and Destiny to Power and Destiny to Attrition are huge concepts in this game, so this is really important game text. If opponent's character of ability less than 4 here is about to leave the table, you may use 1 force, and if you do, the opponent loses 1 force. The boys are deploy 5 and forfeit 6, double warrior, and they do have the battle droid icon, which means that they can work with other droids that have that icon to generate presence at sites even though they don't have any ability. So these two plus another droid, if I'm remembering my rules correctly, any SWCCG players out there might be telling me there's been errata. Somehow these guys can control sites if unopposed. I don't know. They can work together with other droids to be more efficient.
If I recall correctly, that is the presence icon, which states that they have presence despite not having ability, even if you have no ability there. So normally you cannot initiate battle with only droids or against only droids because both players have to have ability there. But they bypass that rule because they have presence. And that was something that
I think the old rule during the episode 1 releases from Decipher was you had to have 2 droids with these together, and together they could form presence. I think they've been eroded to, like you said, you just have this icon, and now you have presence even as a droid. Although I guess in one respect, you could say that these are 2 droids together because it's VT1 and 000.
You could, but I just double checked. You just need the 1 presence icon. I think you're right that you used to have 2. When the episode 1 cards came out, they realized we've got to have a way for battle droids to be able to do battle. And the current rules did not really allow for that. So that icon was created for that purpose. But as you can see here, it's been repurposed into in the Galactic Civil War era. We do have some droids like IG-88. IG-88 basically had this text written out in his card box, and they condensed it into an icon, so they didn't have to use up so much real estate. So these guys can force train as well if your opponent has no characters there.
Yeah, and if you're being a purist, you can place these boys over the Ubercrin 9000 Z001 speeder vehicle for the dark side. But nowadays, if you want, you can put them in front of an Abyssin ornament. It just has to be a dark side card.
That may be the card I have the most of.
The Abyssin ornament? I would believe that with all the Jabba's Palace and enhanced Jabba's Palace.
Yes.
All right, moving on.
In particular.
We now have Darth Plagueis. And I want to say that this is a update of a different Darth Plagueis card, but I could be wrong. Anyway, he is a Moon leader and part of the Trade Federation and the mentor of Darth Sidious. So Darth Plagueis, of course, is a dark side master, so he's got the dark side lightsaber as his icon. Destiny is only 1. Power 3, ability 7. This image is courtesy of Martin Antle. And I have no idea who that is, and there's no internet reference in the image credit, so that's a bit of a rarity in this era. He is deploy 4, forfeit 9. He's a warrior, but not a pilot, and don't let that Destiny 1 deceive you. He has the ominous italicized game text here. Once per game, if this card is drawn for Destiny, you may place this card out of play to make that Destiny draw +6. So that would be at least a 7. If he was drawn in conjunction with another card, it could be even higher than a 7 as you combine your Destinies. Other Dark Jedi, except Sidious, are lost. While alone, your characters with Trade Federation in their lore deploy -1 to Episode 1 era locations, and the big guy is immune to attrition. Do note, other Dark Jedi except Sidious are lost, period. Anywhere on the table. So if Vader is hanging out somewhere else and you deploy Darth Plagueis, Vader is into the lost pile.
Yep. Because every version of Vader is a Dark Jedi. There is, if I recall correctly, I should double check that before I speak incorrectly. But yes, it
has been a number of years since we played this game. So
even the pre-cybernetic enhancements, if you want to call them enhancements, Darth Vader is episode 1. So I did also double check. There is not an existing version of Darth Plagueis. There is a card called Tragedy of Plagueis, which only does something if Revenge of the Sith is on the table. And now, unless they come out with some other card in conjunction with this, you really can't use this with Revenge of the Sith, because Revenge of the Sith makes you choose Maul, Dooku, or Vader to be the apprentice, and you can only deploy Dark Jedi who are Darth Sidious or the Chosen Apprentice. So you would not be able to play Plagueis, because always 2 there are, and this guy would be the 3rd.
Yeah.
But you can play him with
you are,
Trade Federation cards.
Yes. So if you're a purist, you put him over You Are Beaten, which is a great card for him to recover. But again, you can just put him over a Darkside Jawa if you wish. So that'd be pretty cool.
So instead of Revenge of the Sith, you could play him in an invasion deck, which for the remainder of the game, you may not deploy any cards except for Trade Federation starships and characters with Trade Federation in lore. Since he does have Trade Federation in lore, he can help out with invading Naboo.
Yeah, how appropriate. All right, moving on, we've got our final preview card, which is another Jackson-era Star Wars Marvel Comics from the 20th century character, Bellert Valance. I'm actually kind of surprised to see Valance as a light side character, but I can see the argument because he did oppose Vader. He is a Corran cyborg mercenary and former miner, so he's an alien with the Jawa eyes as his card type logo. Destiny 2. The image is from Dr. Valclair at Instagram and Colonel_Guano. Good times. Valance is a bounty hunter who was sent to track down Vader, and he is incredibly droid-phobic, or droid racist, if you will. A bigot toward droids. If you thought that early season Mandalorian Din Djarin was bigoted toward droids, this makes him look like a Boy Scout by comparison. And later in the Marvel Comics from Star Wars back in the 20th century, we find out why, because when he fights Vader, or when he's in a fight with someone, his flesh is exposed, as you can see here in the artwork, to make him look Terminator-esque, but of course this was before the Terminator movie came out, to show that he is a cyborg himself, and Valance hates droids because he had to have those droid replacement parts installed upon him when he had lost a very important battle. So his cybernetic portions always remind him of his personal failure, and therefore he hates that about himself, and then projects that hatred onto other cybernetic and synthetic life forms. But due to his cybernetic enhancements, the man is Power 6, Ability 2, and Armor 5. So Vader found out. Cool. Yeah, Vader found out during their fight that Valance was quite tougher than he appeared, so that's why he's got the Armor 5. He is a pilot, and he adds 2 to the power of anything he pilots. He draws 1 Battle Destiny if unable to otherwise, always a great ability. Unless a Jedi is here, he may cause a character just hit by Valance to be lost, and so you can blast somebody and then make them leave immediately instead of waiting until the resolution of that battle. A huge ability. Once per game, you may... Sorry, go ahead, Nathan.
I just realized that makes him awesome in that Rescue the Princess deck, because that deck doesn't use a lot of Jedi.
Yeah, so we're going to hire Valance to help us rescue Leia. I love it. We're going to send Jackson and Valance down the Death Star to save the princess. All right, so once per game, you may deploy upon him from your reserve deck Cyborg Construct on Valance. I don't remember what Cyborg Construct does, if I'm being honest.
Neither did I, so I looked it up. Cyborg Construct is from the Cloud City expansion, and it deploys on an alien of ability less than 3. It is the wraparound thing that's on Lobot's head.
Oh, or KB's head.
Yeah, so it is a device, and while present with a scomp link, computer interface is a used interrupt, and once per turn, you may use 1 force to search your deck for computer interface and put it into your hand. And once per turn, if it's on Lobot, so not on this guy, you can download a trooper. So
Oh, interesting.
the main thing there is it makes computer interface a used interrupt, regardless of how you're using it. There are two versions of computer interface. One is used or lost. You can play it as a used interrupt to cancel limited resource. You could play it as, well, not a lost interrupt. You could make it a used interrupt with your cyborg construct to use to force or free if Lobot is on the table to examine the top card of your reserve deck, your force pile, and your used pile. Return one of those three cards to the top of each deck or pile.
Oh, that's
So,
nice.
yeah, because you can be like, you know what? This 6 that I just put on my used pile, I'm putting that back on the reserve pile. For those
Yeah.
unfamiliar with the game, one of the major mechanics is that you draw destiny. That's what the number in the top right hand corner of the card is. And drawing destiny represents the will of the force. That makes your blaster hit the bad guy if you draw a high enough destiny, or makes your lightsaber hit the bad guy, or just helps you in battle. Generally, higher numbers are better, and being able to manipulate what's on top of your deck is really, really useful.
Yeah.
Um,
Now, what does
or
the other version of computer interface do?
the other version is a lost or starting interrupt. So you wouldn't use it on the starting side. Now, the starting version lets you put out a mobile site, which is something like Cloud City or the Death Star, something that is kind of on a ship or a station rather than on a planet. Um, that site has to have a scomp link, has to have exactly one light side force icon, and is related to a site on the table. Then you can deploy 2 effects that deploy for free and are always immune to alter. Alter is a card that can cancel many effects, but a lot of effects are also immune to it. And then you place the interrupt in your reserve deck. So that's important because then you can go get it with Cyborg Construct. The lost version, which would become used with this, is retrieve Lobot or a droid. This guy hates droids, but he sure is good at getting them back. Now, I would likely play this character on Cloud City as well, because there's a card from Jabba's Palace that is a former gas miner named Pusumir Thrice, who
Mhm.
um, says that while he's on Cloud City, he adds 1 to your force drains at Cloud City sites, but he also adds 4 to the destiny of your miners. And this guy is a former miner, which would make him Destiny 6 instead of Destiny 2.
Oh, that's a cool combo. Yeah. Hats off once again to Angelo Consoli and Chris Menzel for excellent card design. And of course, in keeping with that theme, if you were going to be a purist, Valance goes in front of a Tabana gas miner light side. And you know what? I might actually just keep doing that with him because I've got a bajillion of those dudes.
Yeah.
And it's very thematic. Yeah. Yeah, that's awesome. Well, if you guys saw any cool characters in here that you've always wanted to play in the card game, or if this piqued your interest in checking out the card game, please head on over to starwarsccg.org and you can check out the Star Wars CCG Players Committee and learn about the history of some of the more important old school expanded universe characters, and of course one of the greatest card games, and I dare say the best Star Wars tabletop game ever created. I even enjoy this game more so than our beloved Star Wars Destiny. It just has so much depth and Star Wars flavor, and it's light years beyond Star Wars, the card game from Fantasy Flight, and I still think it much superior to even Star Wars Unlimited, the latest card game from Fantasy Flight to involve Star Wars.
Yeah, and I think the key thing that you mentioned there is the flavor. There has not been another card game that has really captured the flavor of Star Wars quite as well as this one has. You know, Decipher tried to make a new version of the game that was not Star Wars, and while the mechanics are good, it lost some of the je ne sais quoi of
Yeah,
being Star Wars. It felt like a Star Wars game that had a different layer of paint over it. Whereas
yeah.
a lot of the more modern games feel like a generic game with a Star Wars layer of code over them.
Exactly. Yeah, the Star Wars CCG will forever hold a space in tabletop gaming of a game whose engine and images were created focused on Star Wars.
Yes.
You could say the same thing about Star Trek CCG, and we love that game, and we frankly play it a lot more often than we do Star Wars CCG, and probably won't live long enough to play Star Wars CCG as much as we have played Star Trek CCG. But
Sure.
even the Star Trek CCG, you could swap out the characters and situations and locations, and it would still be the same feeling of the game. The best thing that Star Trek CCG has going for it to make it a Star Trek game more so than any other generic card game from the turn of the century is that you don't win by destruction. In the Star Trek CCG, you win by solving missions or completing missions. You win through knowledge and experience and scoring victory points instead of by killing or destroying or capturing or somehow defeating your opponent. So it is very much violence is not the answer in the Star Trek universe, and I appreciate that. But you could make it a Harry Potter game and still have the same net result. Whereas Star Wars CCG, as Nathan just said about its successor, when you take away the Star Wars, the game kind of folds up and falls apart. So, anyway, go check it out, starwarsccg.org. Now it's time for Derek's favorite part of the show, and that is what Star Wars shirt are we wearing this week? I'm going to go first because mine is the rehash, but Nathan's got something new. I am wearing Grogu, and he is, in fact, all ears. We got an awesome Grogu lawn ornament or statue from John and Jennifer Roberts Madison's parents as one of our Christmas presents, alongside a little Dotson statue to commemorate and memorialize our recently lost Dotson Meyer. We had him for 15 years, and he was a dog's dog for sure. And I miss him greatly, but it's nice to have him memorialized as a lawn ornament, and then Grogu will be there as well. I'm going to seal them with some Thompson's water seal that they also gave to me, and paint them up so that Grogu will look his normal green and brown robe, and Meyer will be his long brown wiener dog self. But Nathan, you've got a cool Star Wars shirt that you got for Christmas.
Yes, I do. It is a shirt that I specifically requested because I love it so much.
Wow!
It has all sorts of helmets on it. So we've got a 9 up of helmets. We have Bo-Katan's helmet here. We have a Phase 1 clone trooper. We have Tech's helmet. We have, I believe, is this Crosshairs or Hunters? This is another Bad Bat.
Yeah, I think it might actually be a Dark Trooper variant. I don't think that's one of the Bad Batch, is it?
Well, anyways, this one here is definitely a Mandalorian Maul supporter. Mm-hmm. This one is
a Magma Trooper.
It could be a Magma Trooper. It could also be one of Palpatine's guards. Also had it in red.
So a clone trooper for sure.
Yeah. So down below we have this is definitely a Clone Force 99 helmet over here.
That's Wrecker.
That's Wrecker.
Yeah.
We have the Ahsoka supporting helmets that Rex and crew wore. And then we have another Mandalorian helmet. I'm not 100% sure if this is supposed to be Jango's specifically, but it is definitely a Mandalorian helmet to round it out. So lots of cool stuff. I really enjoy the shirt, and it is the perfect size, fits like a t-shirt.
Indeed. Well, if you guys out there want your own cool What a Piece of Junk t-shirt, or Fandom Podcast Network t-shirt, or coffee mug, or iPad case, or any of that cool stuff, please head on over to tpublic.com and search up Fandom Podcast Network in the search bar, and you'll find all kinds of merchandise to help keep us on the air. And speaking of being on the air, Nathan, where can people find us on the interwebs?
Well, you can find us in lots of different places. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Podbean, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Google Play, and of course right here on YouTube. I say here because that's where I listen to us. You can find us on Facebook at What a Piece of Junk, a Star Wars podcast. You can email us at whatapieceofjunk@gmail.com. On Twitter, we are What Wars. On Instagram, you can find the entire Fandom Podcast Network at Fandom Podcast Network. And regardless of where you find us, we do love for people to leave us reviews. Of course, we love the 5-star reviews or whatever the maximum is on whatever the rating system they have. But we want you to give whatever review you feel is appropriate. Let us know what we're doing well, what we could be doing better, and what you want to hear from What a Piece of Junk. Now, part of the reason we love those 5-star reviews is it also helps other people find our podcast, and we can share the love with them, and we don't have to boil anybody in acid.
Indeed. And we don't have to submerge them in mud or feed them to a hut. Because not everybody's going to survive that digestion process the way our little major domo friend on.
Yeah. The not again part was so like, what does that mean?
Exactly. Wait, again? All right. Anyway, well, thanks so much for joining us, you guys. Hopefully next week Derek will be back to help us discuss episode 6 of Skeleton Crew. And of course, we want to wish each of you a happy new year 2025. Man, that still sounds like it should be the future. It makes me feel old.
Does.
And, you know, we'll be celebrating the 10th anniversary of Star Wars The Force Awakens next year. So we look forward to that, and we look forward to having all of you join us again on the next episode of What a Piece of Junk. But until then, please always remember to respect each other and always respect each other's fandom. All right, Nathan, punch it!